Now, we're still talking about the clamor for pay by the MPs, and joining us in studio just to take this discussion a little further on, we have social activist and businessman Okeawa Mtata. We also have Nicholas Gumbo, the MP for Rarieda. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time out to talk to us on Sunday Live. Mr. Gumbo, I want to start with you. You're still convinced, or your stand is still that the MPs deserve a higher pay, despite the spirit of the Kenyan people being so averse to it?
Thank you, Janet. I don't think really that, to my mind and to my knowledge, that MPs are actually clamoring for a higher pay.
Is that not what they've been saying?
Well, that is what is being said, but I think what my position is that what we are talking about is maintenance of the status quo. And this is being informed by a number of factors. You know, for example, if you look at MPs who were in the 10th Parliament and up to around about December, what we are saying is that let it be where it was.
And yet that still
yes.
is an argument that many would say is null and void. That was a completely different dispensation. It's like me taking on another job and requesting for the same pay. It doesn't work like that, and I think that's the issue a lot of people are having. Before you go on, I want to bring you into this discussion. You were just saying earlier on, you're against this completely. We know the reasons that a lot of Kenyans have talked about, but tell us why for you particularly this is an issue that bothers you.
There are several issues. Key among them is that we are in a new dispensation whereby the new constitution created a mechanism for setting salaries and benefits of state officers. And that mandate was given to a constitutional commission. And the reason you have constitutional commissions within a democratic setting is that you need institutions of experts that can speak truth to power.
Right.
And that's why you'll find that when you go to a democracy, the most important guardians of democracy are not parliament, are not the president, but are the judiciary, who are not elected, and the editors in the news media like yourself who highlight issues that are going on. So when you come to a situation like that, what we're having in this place is that there's an attempt to rubbish the work of a constitutional commission.
Right.
Then number two, these packs that MPs are trying to retain were full of fraud. Because some of us have taken the extra mile and looked at what is called the Coker Commission report, which was produced, this report, if you read this report, which was produced by the Coker Commission, and as you can see, I've written here restricted copies for reference only, and it was locked away.
Right.
It was never given to Kenyans to see. You'll find that even the Coker report did not award them these monies. For example, the 3.3 million car grant that the MPs are talking about, that was in the last parliament and the previous one, the Coker Commission recommended that they be given an advance from their pay of 3.3 million so that they could buy cars as they come into parliament. And then when that money would be recovered from their salary, so that there's no extra burden. They changed that to a car grant. When you go to the question like the severance allowance, was never there in the Coker report. Right. They created it.
Okay, so what comments do you have?
I think, Janet, I want to look at this in a much wider scale. And I think it's also important that Kenyans also understand where members of parliament are coming from. The manner is being done is, in my view, not right. I'll give you an example. Article 75 of our Constitution is very clear that the conduct of a state officer, whether in private or in public, should not conflict with personal interest. Look at the chair of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, for example. Just about 4 months ago, her salary was about 300,000. Now it's about 900,000. That, to me, is pursuing personal interest. Then you look at the issue that we are talking about. Sometimes about January or December, there was a proposal by the same SRC that members of parliament would earn about 740,000. That was put to public debate. We were not told what the result of the public debate was. Then just a day, 2 days before we went for elections, a Gazette notice was issued. I think these are the issues that we are talking about. And then a third issue, which is also very important. Members of parliament are state officers. There is no denying that.
Yes.
The question we are asking, why this apparent discrimination in the executive? A district officer is given a government vehicle, is given a driver.
And yet these are all issues you could have raised beforehand. That's what people would argue. in as much as you've talked about the timelines.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
We could not, because like I said, the Gazette notice came on 1st of March. I think 1st of March or just when we, just a few days before elections.
Yes.
There was no time to raise this issue.
But you could have pulled out.
Before, 2 days before elections?
Some people might argue.
No.
People might argue.
I think the most important position is to know that the Salaries Commission had been given a free slate to set salaries for MPs. So whoever was running for office should even have expected to get to earn as low as 200,000.
Right.
So the Salaries Commission was not bound by any limitation. Number two, the dispute the MPs are raising is a labor dispute. We have got an industrial court in the High Court, a division of the High Court that deals with industrial matters. The MPs should go to the industrial court and ventilate their grievances. What we are fighting is that they should not take the law into their own hands and go on the floor of Parliament and say this commission has acted unconstitutionally and should be disbanded. Now, when you look, and the reason they cannot do that is that even to get a petition to Parliament that somebody has acted unconstitutionally, if you look at Article 165, it's very clear that the only institution which can declare an act unconstitutional is the High Court. Right. So before the MPs rush a petition to Parliament to try and disband a commission, they should go to the High Court and convince the High Court that the Salaries Commission has acted unconstitutionally, then they can proceed that way, because what they are doing is, even if it goes through and goes to Parliament, it goes to the President and it's approved, then a tribunal is formed. The first defense will be that who decided that this thing was unconstitutional. So it's a waste of public time and money, and so we need to go back and just say, if the MPs have a grievance, everybody has a right to be aggrieved. Let them go to the Constitutional Court, and some of us will come to that court and prove to the Commission that even the money they were earning was fraudulent. Like me, I've got a case, a petition number 769 of 2008, where I want to recover money from MPs. The 1.5 million they paid themselves as severance allowance, and all the criminal allowances they were giving themselves, I want that money recovered and given back to the taxpayer.
I think, as to the constitutionality or otherwise, I think, the Speaker is well versed, and our standing orders are very clear. You cannot allow debate on a matter which is unconstitutional. So the fact that the petition was permitted, it means that it met the basic constitutional threshold. But Janet, I want us to look at this thing in a little bit bigger perspective. The issue, as far as I'm concerned, is the spiraling public wage bill. I am yet to be convinced that if you were to pay members of Parliament 0 cents, the public wage bill will come down. We need to look at all the other areas. For example, look at the constitution, the way Kenya is constituted in terms of the commissions that we have. Do we really need all these commissions? I'll give you an example. India, the largest democracy in the world, with over 800 million registered voters, their election is managed by 3 commissioners. Why does Kenya, with 14 million voters, need 9 commissioners? And even the commissions as they are, look at the commission, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, and even the Commission on Administrative Justice. These are overlapping roles. Let us look at this thing in totality so that it doesn't look, let us not give the public the impression that if you keep the MP salary at 532, then all of a sudden we will be able to manage the public web. I don't think it's correct.
In as much as you're making that point, and you can step in as well, I think really the issue is not so much some of the issues you're raising.
They are, in a way.
In a sense.
Because globally, we are looking at the spiraling wage bill. And the impression being created is that this wage bill is spiraling because these fellows are earning so much. I think that is not the correct impression we should be giving the public. Let us be candid about it so that we see, as a country, yes, it is indeed, it is true that the percentage of what we use in recurrent expenditure as opposed to development expenditure is probably unsustainable. But this one particular sector, this one particular item, the MP salary, to me is not the cure.
I think it's even the
I would say that one thing you have to look at the MP's job is that the MP represents the interest of the people. And so the interest of the people is really to see this wage bill come down. And I think the figure I've given, we want a recurrent expenditure of 40% and a development expenditure of 60%. Right now, it's, I think, the other way around, we are spending about 70% on recurrent expenditure. So the issue of the MP salaries is that a commission has done its work, and the MPs, if they were aggrieved, have refused to go to court, they think they can take the law into their own hands. In fact, the whole problem is taking the law into your own hands and saying we are going to force our way. Right. Recently, we had a presidential election that was disputed. What would have happened if Uhuru had said, I'm going to be sworn in because I've been declared. I'll not wait for the Supreme Court to speak. What would have happened if Raila had said, I don't accept Uhuru's things, so I'm going to do other things?
I want to say
so those things would bring, so what let us respect the institutional framework we have. If MPs are aggrieved that their salaries have not been set accurately, go to the industrial court and let us deal with it.
He has a point, but I think Okia is my good friend, and he will agree with me that the same way you cannot use a statute to repeal or amend the Constitution, you cannot use a subsidiary legislation to amend a statute. This is the problem we have. We are saying that it may have been the right thing, but our laws don't say that if you're doing the right thing, you do it the wrong way. Because in our view, we are seeing a scenario where a subsidiary legislation is being used to amend several acts of parliament, and that to me is unlawful.
I think, Mheshimiwa, on that particular point, I want to correct Mheshimiwa.
Yes, I was
if you look at the Constitution in the Schedule 6 to the Constitution, the transitional clauses, you'll find that Section 6, Section 7, and Section 10 address that issue. And the laws the MPs are referring to, the National Assembly Remuneration Act and their Pension Act, was only secured for the extent of the 10th Parliament. When the 10th Parliament expired, those laws were effectively repealed by this Constitution.
It becomes null and void.
Yeah, they are null and void.
I think that's the issue.
Those are null and void. And that's a question to be determined by the High Court. If the MPs believe that those laws are not repealed, then they should go to the High Court, get Justice Majanja or Justice Mumba or wherever to make a declaration that they were either repealed or they're still in force. Because my reading of the Constitution is that those laws were repealed. And even the petition I filed, one of the questions I've asked the High Court is to declare whether those laws are in force or not. So, and that's why I'm saying that our honorable members should have taken their time to use the institutions we have. And if that was the grievance they had, take it to court, get a declaration. And if the court says that the laws were still in force and the Salaries Commission has violated them, then go with the next stage. But you have to decide for yourself that these things are unconstitutional.
I think, Janet, this again, with all due respect to my good friend Okia, that selective approach to the law, the effect of the Gazette notice is actually even to repeal the Pensions Act. For example, as a member of Parliament, we had a contributory pension scheme. What has it conflicted with the Constitution? The effect of that Gazette notice is to completely repeal that pension, that parliamentary pension scheme. So this is what we are saying, that yes, indeed, it is true. The SRC is empowered by the Constitution to set and even advise on salaries. Review. But why can't it be done in a more, in a more legal way than coming, for example, to say, for example, that pensions that you've been contributing to the last 5 years, you are no longer entitled to it. We are going to give you gratuity at the end of the year. Where is the conflict? There's no conflict at all. So this selective approach to this view of remuneration of members is what we are up against. And I've said it, and I think this is a debate we cannot get away from. If the problem is the spiraling public wage bill, it must be approached globally, not through member salaries alone.
I think the problem is institutional framework, that we have got a constitution with checks, controls, and balances. And MPs are trying to operate outside that framework. What is wrong with the members of the Parliamentary Service Commission going to the industrial court and saying our pension scheme has wrongfully been repealed? Because me, the way I understand this new constitution is that it repealed all those things.
Yes.
And left a blank slate for the Salaries Commission to come in. Secondly, let us understand, is an MP's work a job? Why do MPs work for 15 hours a week? And you work for 40 hours a week?
I want to correct
and when they go into commissions, they're also paid separately for sitting in those commissions. You look at a country like Canada, a country like India. When you become an MP, you cannot be engaged in other gainful employment. It's like any state officer today. In Kenya, we allow MPs to engage in all other business so that they can raise their own income and all what have you, and come to parliament to represent these interests. So to begin treating politics as a career, as a job, as whatever, is also a wrong mindset. Politics
I believe that's essentially the argument that's coming out a lot. And
yes,
this is not to say that, you know, we're speaking out against what you're doing, but this is exactly the message that's coming out. And we're about to wind up.
True. So if you look, and I'm sure he knows, MPs, the work of MPs is not confined to parliament. When he says we work for 15 hours a day, he's forgetting one of our main duties, which is representation.
Right.
I do representation even when I'm sleeping on my bed. Right now, as I was coming to this studio, how many people have called me from home telling me their houses have been swept and they need me to help them, and helping them here, what does it mean?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
as we wind up? Just looking at, despite the fact that this is something that...
Before you ask, I need to clarify something. We take comparisons out of context. When you talk about Canada, you talk about those other countries. I've been to these Western countries. For example, a congressman in America, other than what they are given as their remuneration, they are also given huge allowances.
All right, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you short. I'm going to have to cut you short. We've completely out of time.
Yes.
Would it be so difficult, though, to carry out your mandate with the amount of money that the Salaries and Remuneration Commission has advised? I just want you to answer that.
I will answer that.
Very briefly.
Our social protection system makes it impossible, unless you want me to come here and lie to you, because the social protection system that we have in Kenya is non-existent. Today, when I go home, somebody comes to me, the wife has gone to the hospital, they are unable to pay hospital bill. Am I supposed to tell them?
And yet some people do that
with my job?
And yet some people...
What I may add is that
we have to wind up, gentlemen.
The real amount MPs are going to earn is 1.2 million shillings.
Yes.
When you look at the benefits added onto it, that's the salary they're going to take out at the end of the month. Number
that
two, if you look at this thing, like this is the last estimate for MPs of last time. If you compare the amount of money we spend on parliament per year to what we spend on CDF, we're spending more money on parliament for 210 MPs than we're spending on CDF for the entire country.
We're completely out of time, gentlemen. We're completely out of time.
Parliament has also parliamentary staff besides members of parliament. So it's not correct to say that all the money that is given to parliament goes to the pockets of MPs.
I think perhaps it's the way that the message has been communicated.
Yes.
The figures also seemingly to a lot of Kenyans being upset
that's
because
not true.
Particularly you're looking at constituents who are earning 10,000 and having to make it
but the bottom line,
that. I think that's one of the issues that has come out, but we have to wind up, unfortunately.
Grievances must be taken to the judiciary.
Okay.
Let MPs go to court, not take the law into their own hands.
No doubt.
If they do that, we are going to storm that parliament and persuade them that
the 14th of May. Was that it? Was that the date? 14th of May?
On 14th of this month.
Okay.
So we hope we don't get to that point, but if we get to that point, we are going to storm that parliament and show that it's not only them who can take the law into their hands.
Right.
We can
Thank you so much.
do the same.
Unfortunately, I have to leave it at that. This is no doubt a debate that is going to rage on. Rarieda MP Nicholas Gumbo and, of course, social activist Okiya Omtata talking to us, shaking hands in studio, despite the fact that they might be meeting in court on the 14th of May. It's a debate that could really rage on for a long time. A lot of Kenyans expressing discontent, especially because of the figures. They're talking about the legal aspect, but a lot of Kenyans are looking at the human aspect of it. How is it going to affect that child or that man or that woman who's living, the 5 million people that are living in slums in Nairobi, having to relate to the kind of figures that the MPs are asking for? Thank you so much for coming, gentlemen. Let's now take a short break. We're going to be back on Sunday Live next.